Welcome to Tales of Mystery and Moonlight. Tonight, we journey aboard the Kashmir Express, that magnificent serpent of steel winding through the foothills of the Himalayas. Here, amid polished mahogany and the scent of Darjeeling tea, death waits in a first-class compartment. Hercule Poirot, the great Belgian detective, sought rest among the mountains. Instead, he found murder most calculated. Join us for Death on the Kashmir Express, a tale of colonial secrets, mountain shadows, and a killer who believed the perfect crime possible upon the rails. This mystery unfolds in homage to the masterful Agatha Christie, whose genius we honor, though this enigma travels on our own terms. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where are you joining us from tonight? Your presence illuminates our journey through these shadowed mysteries. Now, let the wheels begin to turn. Chapter 1. The Srinagar Special. The Dorabji railway station sweltered beneath the April sun, its platform a chaos of porters, passengers, and the peculiar symphony of British India. The shout of vendors, the hiss of steam, the murmur of a dozen languages braiding together beneath the colonial arches. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, mopped my brow, and wondered, not for the first time, what madness had possessed Poirot to accept an invitation to the hill station of Gulmarg. My friend detested travel. He abhorred discomfort. And yet, here he stood upon platform 3. Immaculate in a cream linen suit, his patent leather shoes somehow unblemished despite the dust, examining his first-class ticket with the expression of a man who had discovered a spelling error in the Magna Carta. "Hastings," he said, his voice carrying that familiar note of gentle despair. "They have placed me in compartment 7. Sept, a prime number. It offends the sensibilities." "I'm sure the railway company meant no harm, Poirot." "Harm? No, merely carelessness. It is always carelessness that precedes catastrophe." He tucked the ticket into his breast pocket with surgical precision. "But come, let us board before this heat dissolves what remains of my composure." The Kashmir Express gleamed before us. 12 carriages of colonial engineering, their burgundy flanks polished to a mirror shine. First class occupied the forward carriages, separated from the common passengers by a dining car that, according to Poirot's research, served an acceptable café au lait. This single detail had proven decisive in his acceptance of Lord Dorian Ashworth's invitation. We mounted the steps into carriage B, and the temperature dropped immediately. Ceiling fans stirred the air. The corridor stretched before us, panelled in teak, brass fittings winking in the afternoon light, filtering through muslin curtains. "Compartment 7, I said, reading the plaques. "Just ahead." But Poirot had stopped. His hand rose, that characteristic gesture that meant his little grey cells had detected something. "Observe, Hastings." I followed his gaze. Further down the corridor, 2 figures stood in heated conversation before compartment 4. The first was a tall man with military bearing, his white linen suit failing to disguise the tension in his shoulders. Grey whiskers framed a face mottled with anger. The second figure, younger, darker, with the sleek appearance of a city solicitor, leaned close, his voice a hissing whisper I could not quite catch. "Warning you, Ashworth! Last chance! You dare threaten me!" The older man's voice carried clearly now. "After what you did, get out of my sight, Mallory, before I have the conductor remove you from this train." The younger man, Mallory, stepped back. His smile was thin, unpleasant. "As you wish, Sir Dorian. But remember, debts always come due." He turned sharply and disappeared into compartment 5, the door clicking shut behind him. Sir Dorian Ashworth remained in the corridor, his chest heaving. Then he noticed us watching. The transformation was remarkable. The fury drained from his face, replaced by the practiced bonhomie of a man accustomed to colonial society. He strode toward us, hand extended. "Monsieur Poirot! Delighted, absolutely delighted. And this must be Captain Hastings. I've read your accounts with great pleasure." His handshake was firm, his smile broad, but I noticed his left eyelid twitched. "My wife is terribly excited to have you aboard. She's a great admirer." "You are most kind, Sir Dorian," Poirot said. I could not help but observe a difficulty with a fellow passenger. Ashworth's smile flickered. "Mallory. No. Business disagreement, nothing more. Man has no breeding, but one cannot choose one's travelling companions." He laughed, but the sound rang hollow. "You'll join us for dinner in the dining car? 7 o'clock? My wife, my secretary, and a few others. Nothing formal." "We shall be honoured. Excellent, excellent." Ashworth's eyes darted toward compartment 5, then back. "Until this evening, then." He retreated into compartment 4, and I heard the lock engage with a definitive click. "Well," I said as we continued to our own compartment, "that was curious." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Most curious, Hastings. A man who invites Hercule Poirot to dinner while concealing something that causes him to triple-lock his door. One wonders what Sir Dorian fears more, Mr. Mallory or something else entirely." Compartment 7 proved acceptable, even to Poirot's exacting standards. 2 bunks, a wash-basin, and windows that offered a panoramic view. As the train lurched into motion, leaving Dorabji behind in a cloud of steam and coal smoke. I unpacked while Poirot arranged his toiletries with geometric precision. The landscape shifted from dusty plains to green foothills, the first hint of the mountains to come. "Tell me about Sir Dorian," I said. "Beyond the invitation, I mean." Poirot settled into his seat, fingertips pressed together. "Sir Dorian Ashworth, tea merchant, one of the largest exporters in British India. His family has dominated the trade for 3 generations. A knight of the realm, widowed once, remarried 5 years ago to a woman 30 years his junior. Lady Ashworth, I presume. Précisément. The former Miss Vivian Carstairs. A beauty by all accounts and rather fond of society. She insisted on this journey to the hills. The heat in Calcutta was destroying her complexion." Poirot's tone carried a gentle mockery. "Sir Dorian also travels with his private secretary, a Mr. Jonathan Crewe. Efficient, I am told. Indispensable. And Mallory, the man in the corridor?" "Ah." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Charles Mallory, solicitor. He handled certain transactions for the Dorabji Tea Company until a scandal 2 years ago. Accusations of embezzlement, never proven." Sir Dorian dismissed him quietly. One wonders why Mallory is aboard the same train as the man who ruined his career. Coincidence? Hastings. Poirot fixed me with a pitying look. There are no coincidences, only connections we fail to perceive. The train climbed. Outside, terraced fields gave way to dense forest, the air cooling as we rose. I must have dozed, for the next thing I knew, Poirot was adjusting his tie in the mirror, and the light had turned golden. 7 o'clock approaches, mon ami. We must not keep Sir Dorian waiting. The dining car occupied the centre of the train, a temple of colonial elegance. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, and the gentle clink of silverware accompanied the rhythmic sway of the carriages. Brass lamps cast warm circles of light, and through the windows the first stars pricked the darkening sky. Sir Dorian's party occupied the largest table. He rose as we approached, his earlier agitation seemingly forgotten. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, come. He made the introductions with practised ease. Lady Vivian Ashworth was indeed beautiful, perhaps 30, with honey-coloured hair and wide eyes that held a restlessness I found unsettling. She wore a silk gown the colour of champagne, and smiled at Poirot with the sort of intensity that suggested either genuine fascination or well-rehearsed charm. Monsieur Poirot, at last, I've read every account of your cases. The affair of the Belgian ambassador, simply thrilling. You are too kind, madam. Beside her sat Jonathan Crewe, Sir Dorian's secretary, thin, pale, with spectacles that magnified his eyes to owlish proportions. He nodded politely but said little, his attention flickering between his employer and the window, as though expecting something. The final member of the party was Miss Priya Sharma, introduced as a distant cousin of Lady Ashworth's first husband, a connection so convoluted I lost the thread entirely. She was perhaps 25, handsome rather than pretty, with sharp cheekbones and watchful dark eyes. She wore Western dress, but a single thread of gold at her throat suggested depths unexplored. Miss Sharma travels to Srinagar on family business, Lady Ashworth explained, her tone suggesting the family business was rather beneath discussion. Property matters, Miss Sharma said coolly. My grandfather's estate requires attention. Dinner proceeded with the strained conviviality of strangers pretending intimacy. Sir Dorian dominated the conversation, discussing tea exports and the shifting political climate, with the bluster of a man accustomed to being heard. Lady Ashworth interjected occasionally, her laughter a touch too bright, her glances toward the window a touch too frequent. Crewe ate in silence. Miss Sharma deflected personal questions with a diplomat's skill. And through it all, Poirot observed. I knew that look, the slight angle of his head, the half-lidded eyes. His little grey cells were working. As the dessert course arrived, a creditable creme caramel, Charles Mallory entered the dining car. The atmosphere crystallized. Sir Dorian's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Lady Ashworth's smile became a mask. Crewe's hand trembled, rattling his water glass. Mallory ignored them all. He took a table at the far end of the car, ordered whiskey, and proceeded to drink it while staring at Sir Dorian with undisguised contempt. That man, Lady Ashworth whispered, is an absolute menace. Dorian, can nothing be done? He has a ticket, Sir Dorian muttered. Even I cannot remove a first-class passenger for looking. But the things he's been saying... Vivian! Sir Dorian's voice cracked like a whip. Not here! Lady Ashworth fell silent, but her eyes glistened with something, fear. Anger? I could not tell. Miss Sharma watched the exchange with an expression of detached interest. Crewe had gotten pale as milk. Poirot dabbed his moustache with a napkin. Sir Dorian, he said gently, forgive the impertinence, but it appears Mr. Mallory's presence causes you considerable distress. Is there perhaps some history I should understand? For a moment, I thought Sir Dorian would refuse to answer. Then his shoulders sagged. Mallory worked for me 3 years ago. He was useful. Then I discovered irregularities in the accounts. Significant sums had vanished. I could prove nothing definitively, but I dismissed him nonetheless. And he blames you for his ruin? He blames everyone but himself. The man is a parasite. Sir Dorian's voice hardened. He's been sending letters for months, threatening to reveal secrets about my business practices. Lies, all of it. but the insinuations alone could damage me. "Blackmail," I said, "of a sort." Sir Dorian signalled for brandy. "He wants money, compensation he calls it." I have refused, and now he follows you aboard this train, Poirot murmured. "Most persistent, this Mr. Mallory." "Persistent, yes." Sir Dorian drained his brandy in one swallow. "That is precisely the word." We retired early. The train had entered the mountain passes, and the sway of the carriages grew more pronounced as we climbed. I found sleep elusive, the rhythm of the wheels underscoring a vague unease I could not name. At some point past midnight, I heard movement in the corridor, footsteps quick and furtive, passing our door. Then silence. I turned over and finally slept. The scream came at dawn. It pierced the grey morning like a blade, high, raw, utterly human. I was on my feet before I fully woke, fumbling for my dressing gown. Poirot was already in the corridor, his expression grave. "Hastings? Quickly!" We followed the commotion to carriage B's forward end. A cluster of passengers had gathered, their faces pale in the early light. A woman, Lady Ashworth, stood pressed against the wall, her hands covering her mouth. The conductor, a turbaned man with a magnificent moustache, blocked the passage to the exterior door. "No one must go further," he said. "There has been an accident." But Poirot was already moving. He spoke to the conductor in rapid Hindustani, flashed something from his pocket, a card, perhaps, and the man stepped aside. The exterior door stood open, cold mountain air rushing in. On the iron platform between carriages, slumped against the railing, lay the body of Sir Dorian Ashworth. His eyes were open, fixed on the brightening sky. His face bore an expression of profound surprise. And around his throat, livid against the flesh, was a ring of bruises, the colour of ripe plums. Sir Dorian Ashworth had not fallen from the train. He had been strangled. Chapter 2. Murder in the Mountain Pass. The cold struck like a physical blow. At this altitude, dawn carried the bite of winter, and the wind sweeping through the open doorway numbed my fingers within moments. But it was not the cold that held my attention. Sir Dorian Ashworth lay crumpled against the iron railing of the vestibule platform, that narrow passage between carriages where passengers might step out to smoke or take the air. His dinner jacket was immaculate, not a button undone, not a thread displaced. His shoes gleamed with fresh polish. Only his face betrayed the violence of his end. Eyes bulging, tongue protruding slightly, and those terrible bruises encircling his throat like a grotesque necklace. Poirot knelt beside the body, heedless of the grime on his trousers. His fingers, encased in a handkerchief, tilted Sir Dorian's chin gently. "Strangulation," he murmured. "Manual. You see the pattern, Hastings? The thumbprints here, the windpipe, the fingers curving around to the nape, a strong grip, sustained pressure." I forced myself to look. The bruises did indeed form a pattern, two distinct ovals where thumbs had pressed, surrounded by the elongated marks of gripping fingers. Could he have fallen and caught himself somehow? The railing? No. Poirot shook his head. "The railing is smooth iron. It leaves no such marks," and observed. He lifted Sir Dorian's right hand. "The fingernails. See the skin beneath them?" He clawed at his attacker. There was a struggle, brief but fierce. Behind us, the conductor wrung his hands. "Sahib, the passengers grow restless. What shall I tell them?" "Tell them nothing yet." Poirot rose, brushing his knees with distaste. "The train, when does it next stop?" "Baramulla Station, Sahib. 3 hours." "3 hours?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "Then, for 3 hours, We are sealed together, the killer and the killed. Most convenient. He turned to me. Hastings, we must work quickly. Secure this area. No one enters, no one leaves. I must examine the scene before the evidence disappears. The next hour passed in methodical investigation. The conductor, whose name was Singh, a steady man despite his distress, cleared the corridor and stood guard while Poirot conducted his examination with the precision of a surgeon. I took notes, as was my habit. The vestibule platform measured perhaps 6 feet by 4, cramped, cold, open to the elements on both sides where the carriages connected. A low iron railing prevented falls, but it reached only to mid-thigh. Beyond it, the mountain dropped away in a dizzying plunge of rock and pine forest. The body was discovered at approximately 5:45, Poirot dictated. The train had been climbing through the Pir Panjal Pass since 3 o'clock. Temperature at discovery, near freezing. The victim wears evening dress, no overcoat, no hat. He came out here unprepared for the cold. Suggesting he didn't intend to stay long? Or that he was lured, compelled. One does not step onto an open platform in evening clothes at dawn unless there is reason. Poirot crouched again, examining the floor. Cigarette ash, 2 distinct types, one Turkish, one Indian. Sidorian smoked Turkish. I observed his case at dinner. So another person stood here with him. I peered at the ash. To me it looked identical, but I had long since learned not to question Poirot's observations. The killer, perhaps, or an earlier visitor. We must determine the timeline. He straightened, scanning the vestibule walls. Hastings, the door handle, observe it. The interior door, leading back into carriage B, bore a brass handle worn smooth by countless hands. But along its lower edge, something caught the morning light. Thread, I said, leaning closer. Blue thread, caught on the brass. Précisément. Poirot produced a small envelope from his pocket and tweezed the thread free. Silk, I think, from a garment. When we interview the passengers, we must note who wears blue silk. He pocketed the evidence and turned to the body once more. His expression grew thoughtful. The rigor mortis, it has begun but is not complete. Death occurred perhaps 4 to 6 hours ago, between midnight and 2 in the morning. The cold would slow the process, but not significantly at this elevation. He paused. And yet, what is it? Poirot lifted Sidorian's left arm. The sleeve rode up, revealing the wrist and the dead man's watch. Stopped, Poirot said softly, at 1:17. The crystal was cracked, the hands frozen in place. A small detail, easily overlooked. He struck it during the struggle. So it would appear. 1:17 in the morning, that is our window, Hastings. That is when Sir Dorian Ashworth met his end. We returned to the interior of carriage B, where Singh had assembled the relevant passengers in the dining car. The morning sun now streamed through the windows, incongruously cheerful given the circumstances. Lady Ashworth sat rigid in her chair, a cup of tea untouched before her. Her face was chalk white, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. Beside her, Miss Sharma maintained a watchful stillness, her hand resting on Lady Ashworth's arm in a gesture of comfort. Jonathan Crewe stood by the window, his spectacles catching the light. He had dressed hurriedly, his collar was askew, his tie knotted off-centre. For a man whose profession demanded precision, the dishevelment was telling. And at the far end of the car, under the watchful eye of a turbaned steward, sat Charles Mallory. He alone seemed unaffected. He lounged in his chair, whisky already in hand despite the hour, regarding the assembly with sardonic amusement. "Well, well," he said as we entered, "the great detective. I wondered when you'd get around to us." Poirot ignored him. He took a position at the head of the car, his small figure somehow commanding despite the chaos. "Mesdames, messieurs, you are aware that Sir Dorian Ashworth is dead. What you may not know is that he was murdered, strangled by human hands between midnight and 2 o'clock this morning." He paused, allowing the words to settle. "The train does not stop for 3 hours. Until then we are sealed together. The killer is among us." Lady Ashworth made a small sound, not quite a sob. "Monsieur Poirot," Crewe said, his voice strained, "surely there's been some mistake. Sir Dorian, he had enemies, yes, but murder on a train? There is no mistake, Monsieur Crewe. The evidence is unambiguous." Poirot's gaze swept the room. "Now, I must ask each of you to account for your movements last night, beginning with you, Lady Ashworth." She flinched but composed herself. "I retired to my compartment at 10:30. Dorian—" her voice caught. "Dorian said he wished to smoke and would join me shortly. I read for perhaps an hour, then fell asleep. I did not wake until the conductor's shout this morning. You heard nothing in the night? No disturbance? Nothing. The train was noisy. The wheels, the wind, if there were sounds." She shook her head. "And your compartment? It adjoins Sir Dorian's?" "A connecting door, yes, but it was locked. Dorian preferred privacy when he worked late." Poirot nodded slowly. "Monsieur Crewe, your account, if you please." The secretary pushed his spectacles up his nose, a nervous habit I noted. "I was in my own compartment, number 6. I worked on correspondence until perhaps midnight, then slept. Sir Dorian had given me several letters to prepare for posting at Baramulla." "You did not see Sir Dorian after dinner?" "Briefly, around 11. He asked me to bring the Dorabji accounts ledger to his compartment. I did so, and he dismissed me." "He seemed troubled?" Crewe hesitated. "He was preoccupied, but that was not unusual. Sir Dorian carried many burdens." "Bien." Poirot turned to Miss Sharma. "Mademoiselle." She met his gaze steadily. "I retired at 11. I read until perhaps midnight, a novel, nothing more, then slept. I heard nothing." "Your compartment is number 8? On the opposite side of the corridor from the Ashworths." "You were alone." A flicker of something irritation crossed her face. "Naturally." "Forgive the question." Poirot inclined his head. "And now, Monsieur Mallory." Mallory's smile widened. He set down his whiskey with exaggerated care. "Ah, yes, the obvious suspect, the man with the grudge." He spread his hands. "I was in my compartment all night. Number 5. Alone. No witnesses. Terribly convenient, isn't it?" "You admit you had reason to wish Sir Dorian harm?" "Harm?" Mallory laughed. "I wanted to see him ruined, publicly humiliated, stripped of everything he stole from me. But dead?" He shook his head. "Dead. He's useless. I can't very well blackmail a corpse." "Blackmail?" Poirot's eyebrows rose. "You admit this freely?" "Why not? Everyone here knows what I was doing. Ashworth himself announced it at dinner." Mallory leaned forward, his amusement fading. "But understand this, Monsieur Poirot. I didn't kill him. I had no reason to. Alive, he was worth a fortune to me. Dead, he's worth nothing." The logic was cold but undeniable. Poirot studied him for a long moment. "You were seen arguing with Sir Dorian yesterday afternoon. You threatened him." "I reminded him that debts come due. A figure of speech." Mallory shrugged. "He owed me. He knew it. But I'm a patient man. I was content to wait." "And yet you boarded the same train as your victim. A remarkable coincidence." "Coincidence?" Mallory's eyes glittered. Don't be naive, monsieur. I followed him. I wanted him uncomfortable, nervous. Guilty men make mistakes. I intended to pressure him into settlement. Murder was never part of the plan. Poirot dismissed them to their compartments under supervision, and we retreated to the privacy of the corridor. Well, Hastings, your impressions? I considered. Mallory is the obvious choice. Motive, opportunity, history of conflict. Too obvious, perhaps? You think he's telling the truth? Poirot stroked his moustache. I think, mon ami, that a man who admits to blackmail is either very foolish or very clever. Mallory is not a fool. Then who? That is what we must determine. He began walking toward the rear of the carriage. Come, we must examine the compartments. A crime leaves traces, Hastings. Always, always traces. Sir Dorian's compartment, number 4, was a study in ordered luxury. A leather writing case sat open on the small desk. Papers were arranged in neat stacks. A crystal decanter of brandy stood on the side table, 2/3 full, a single glass beside it. Poirot examined the glass, sniffing delicately. Brandy, recently consumed, perhaps 2 hours before death, judging by the residue. He set it down and moved to the writing case. Letters, he murmured, rifling through. Business correspondence, a telegram from Calcutta, routine shipping matters. He paused, and this. He withdrew a single sheet of paper, handwritten. The script was feminine, elegant. I read over his shoulder. We cannot continue like this. He suspects. Tonight, after dinner, the vestibule platform. Come alone. We must decide. VV, I said. Vivienne, Lady Ashworth. Poirot's eyes gleamed. So it would appear. A secret meeting with her own husband, or... He folded the letter carefully. Or was this note not meant for Sir Dorian at all? I don't understand. Consider, Hastings, he suspects. Who suspects? If Lady Ashworth wrote this to her husband, who is the he she fears? The implication struck me like a blow. She was meeting someone else, and Sir Dorian discovered it. One possibility among many. Poirot pocketed the letter, but it suggests that the motive for this murder may not be blackmail or business at all. It may be something far older, far more dangerous. He turned to face me, his expression grave. It may be love, Hastings, and love, twisted into jealousy, is the deadliest poison of all. Chapter 3. Contradictions and Confessions. The train climbed higher. Beyond the windows, the world had transformed. Lush forests giving way to bare rock faces, the air thinning, the sky assuming that peculiar crystalline blue found only at altitude. Snow capped the distant peaks, and the Kashmir Express wound through the landscape like a mechanical serpent, indifferent to the drama unfolding within its polished carriages. Poirot and I continued our examination of Sir Dorian's compartment with methodical care. The writing case yielded nothing further of interest. Bills of lading, shipping manifests, the tedious paperwork of empire. But the accounts ledger that Crewe had mentioned was conspicuously absent. Sir Dorian requested it at 11 o'clock, Poirot murmured, tapping his fingers against the desk. Crewe delivered it. And yet it is not here. Perhaps he returned it? To Crewe? At what hour? The secretary claims he retired at midnight. Poirot shook his head. No, Hastings, the ledger is missing, and I suspect its contents may illuminate this affair considerably. We moved to the connecting door between Sir Dorian's compartment and Lady Ashworth's. It was indeed locked. From Sir Dorian's side, the key still in place. She could not have entered through here, I observed, not without breaking the lock, and see, Poirot examined the keyhole, the surrounding wood. No scratches, no forced entry. If Lady Ashworth killed her husband, she did not do so through this door. Then she's innocent? Poirot smiled faintly. She is innocent of entering through this door. That is not the same thing, mon ami. Lady Ashworth received us in her compartment with the brittle composure of a woman holding herself together through sheer will. She had changed from her nightclothes into a simple black dress. Morning already. Her hands trembled as she poured tea from a silver service. "Please sit," she said. "I apologize for the state of things. I find myself quite undone." "You have suffered a great shock, madame," Poirot said gently, settling into the chair opposite. "We shall not tax you more than necessary, but there are questions that must be asked." "I understand." She raised the teacup to her lips but did not drink. "Ask what you must." "The letter we found in your husband's compartment." Poirot withdrew the folded paper. "You recognize the handwriting." Lady Ashworth's face went very still. She set down the cup with exaggerated care. "Where did you find that?" "Among Sir Dorian's papers. It is signed with the initial V. It speaks of a secret meeting, of suspicion." Poirot's voice remained gentle, but his eyes were sharp. "Did you write this letter, madame?" For a long moment she said nothing. Then her shoulders sagged. "Yes, I wrote it. And the meeting it describes, this was with your husband?" "No." The word came out barely above a whisper. "It was not." I felt the atmosphere in the compartment shift. Poirot leaned forward slightly. "Then with whom, Lady Ashworth?" She closed her eyes. When she spoke again, her voice was hollow. "Jonathan. Jonathan Crewe." The name hung in the air between us. "You are conducting an affair with your husband's secretary." "Conducted, past tense." Lady Ashworth opened her eyes, and I saw defiance kindling there, alongside the grief. "It ended months ago. Jonathan, Mr. Crewe, he wanted to continue. I refused. I had come to my senses. Dorian was not a perfect husband, but he did not deserve such betrayal. And yet you arranged this meeting last night." Jonathan insisted. He said he had something urgent to discuss. Something about Dorian's business. Something I needed to know. Her voice cracked. "I thought perhaps he had discovered Mallory's blackmail scheme, wanted to warn me. I never imagined. You went to the vestibule platform to meet him?" "Yes, shortly after midnight. But Jonathan never came. I waited perhaps 10 minutes, freezing in that dreadful wind, and then I returned to my compartment." She looked up at Poirot, her eyes pleading. "When I left, Dorian was alive. I passed his door. I heard him moving inside. When I returned, there was only silence. You heard nothing else? No argument, no struggle? Nothing. The train was so loud." She pressed a hand to her temple. "You must believe me, Monsieur Poirot. I did not kill my husband. Despite everything, despite my own failures, I did not kill him." Poirot studied her for a long moment. Then he rose. "Thank you, Lady Ashworth. You have been most helpful." We found Jonathan Crewe in his compartment, surrounded by the tools of his trade. Typewriter, paper, fountain pens arranged with obsessive neatness. He had restored his appearance since our earlier interview. His collar was straight, his tie properly knotted. But his hands, I noticed, would not stay still. "Monsieur Crewe," Poirot began without preamble, "you lied to me this morning." Crewe's face went pale. "I don't know what you mean." "You claim to have retired at midnight and slept through the night. This is untrue. You arranged to meet Lady Ashworth on the vestibule platform." The secretary's composure crumbled. He removed his spectacles and pressed his fingers to his eyes. "She told you?" "She had no choice. The letter was discovered. Poirot sat down, regarding Crewe with an expression that was almost sympathetic. "Now, the truth, if you please." Crewe replaced his spectacles with shaking hands. "Yes, I arranged the meeting. I needed to speak with her, alone, without Sir Dorian's knowledge. About what? About," he hesitated, "about the accounts. The accounts ledger, the one you delivered to Sir Dorian at 11 o'clock? Yes." Crewe's voice dropped. "There are irregularities, discrepancies I noticed only recently. Large sums moved to accounts I don't recognize, payments to companies that don't seem to exist. I believe Sir Dorian was laundering money, Monsieur Poirot, or hiding assets, I don't know which." This was unexpected. I glanced at Poirot, who showed no surprise. "And you wish to warn Lady Ashworth of this?" "I wish to warn her that if Mallory discovered the truth, the real truth, the scandal would destroy her. Destroy everything." Crewe's hands clenched. "Sir Dorian was not merely the victim of blackmail. He was guilty, Monsieur Poirot, perhaps of crimes far worse than anything Mallory imagined. Yet you did not meet Lady Ashworth last night." "No, He swallowed hard. "I lost my nerve. I dressed, I opened my door, and then I saw someone in the corridor. A figure moving toward the vestibule. I retreated. I told myself I would speak with her this morning instead." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A figure. Could you see who it was?" "Not clearly. The corridor was dark, but—" He hesitated. "They wore blue. A blue dressing gown, I think, silk." "The blue thread." My mind raced. "You are certain of the colour?" "Quite certain. It caught the light from my doorway." Crewe looked down at his hands. "I assumed it was Lady Ashworth, going to the platform as we had arranged. But now you wonder if you witnessed the killer's approach." Crewe nodded miserably. Miss Priya Sharma's compartment was spare and orderly, containing little beyond the essentials of travel. She received us with the same watchful composure she had displayed all morning, gesturing for us to sit without rising from her own seat by the window. "I wondered when you would come," she said. "I imagine you have questions about my presence on this train. Your perception does you credit, mademoiselle." Poirot settled into his chair. "Lady Ashworth introduced you as a distant cousin by marriage, a connection so tenuous as to strain credibility. The connection is real, if distant." Miss Sharma's expression remained neutral. "My grandfather married the sister of Lady Ashworth's first husband. We are related by marriage twice removed, and this connection brought you aboard the Kashmir Express, in a manner of speaking." She paused, seeming to weigh her words. "The truth, Monsieur Poirot, is that I came to observe Sir Dorian Ashworth." "To observe him? For what purpose? My family, my true family, on my mother's side, owns tea plantations in Assam. Small operations, nothing like the Dorabji Empire. 3 years ago, Sir Dorian's company purchased our largest estate. The price paid was inadequate. My grandfather believes we were cheated. You came seeking redress. I came seeking evidence." Her dark eyes met Poirot's steadily. "I believed Sir Dorian was engaged in fraudulent business practices. I hoped to discover proof aboard this train, letters, documents, anything that might support a legal claim." "A dangerous game, mademoiselle. Perhaps, but necessary." She glanced toward the window. "I had no intention of killing him, if that is your implication. A dead man cannot be sued. A dead man cannot be compelled to make restitution. And yet Sir Dorian is dead. You must admit the timing is suggestive." "Suggestive of what? That I strangled a man twice my size?" A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "I am neither strong enough nor foolish enough Monsieur Poirot, if I wished Sir Dorian dead, I would have found a more elegant method. Poirot tilted his head. You were seen last night, moving through the corridor. For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Surprise? Concern? By whom? That need not concern you. The question is, where were you going? Miss Sharma was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed. To the vestibule platform. I smoke, Monsieur Poirot. A habit Lady Ashworth finds distasteful. I stepped out for a cigarette at approximately 12:30. And what did you observe? Nothing. The platform was empty. I smoked. I returned to my compartment. I slept. She met his gaze. I saw no one. I heard nothing. The cigarette you smoked, what brand? Her eyebrows rose. An Indian blend. Gold flake. Why? Curiosity only. Poirot rose. One more question. Mademoiselle, what colour is your dressing gown? My dressing gown? She seemed genuinely puzzled. Green. Emerald green. Is that significant? Perhaps not. Thank you for your time. We retreated to our own compartment. The train had begun its descent from the highest point of the pass, the wheels singing a different rhythm as we wound through switchbacks and tunnels. Poirot sat in silence, his fingertips pressed together, his eyes half closed. 3 liars, he said at last, and yet perhaps 3 truths as well. I don't follow. Lady Ashworth admits the affair, the letter, the midnight meeting that never occurred. Crewe admits the arranged rendezvous, his cowardice, and the figure in blue. Miss Sharma admits her investigation, her cigarette, her presence on the platform. He opened his eyes. Each confesses to something. But not one confesses to murder. Then who is the killer? Consider the evidence, Hastings. The blue silk thread caught on the door handle. Crewe saw a figure in blue approaching the vestibule. Miss Sharma wears green. Lady Ashworth, what colour was her nightdress this morning? I thought back. White. White with lace trim. And Mallory? I didn't notice. Navy blue dressing gown. Silk. I observed it when he answered his door this morning. The implication struck me. Mallory. But he had no reason. He claims he had no reason. He claims Sir Dorian was worth more alive than dead. Poirot's moustache twitched. But what if Mallory lied about the nature of his blackmail? What if the secret he held was worth more than money? What could be worth more than money? Freedom, Hastings. Safety. The avoidance of the hangman's noose. Poirot leaned forward. What if Mallory possessed evidence not merely of financial irregularities, but of a far greater crime? A crime for which Sir Dorian would kill rather than be exposed. Then Sir Dorian would have killed Mallory, not the other way round. Ah, but perhaps Sir Dorian tried. Perhaps there was a confrontation, a struggle, and Mallory defended himself more effectively than anticipated. Poirot shook his head slowly. No, that does not fit. The strangulation was deliberate, sustained. This was no spontaneous act. He rose and moved to the window, watching the mountains slide past. We are missing something, Hastings. A piece of the puzzle that will make everything clear. And I believe, he paused, his eyes narrowing, I believe the missing ledger holds the key. The accounts ledger? But Crewe said many things. Not all of them, I suspect, were true. Poirot turned from the window. Come, we must search the train. That ledger exists somewhere, and when we find it, we find our killer. Chapter 4. The Breakthrough. The search for the missing ledger consumed the next hour. We began with Sir Dorian's compartment, examining every drawer, every hidden nook, every possible concealment. The leather writing case yielded nothing new. The wardrobe contained only suits, immaculately pressed. Even the space beneath the bunk, cramped and dusty, revealed nothing but a forgotten cufflink and a railway timetable from the previous year. "It is not here," Poirot declared, straightening with a wince. His fastidious nature rebelled against such undignified searching. "The killer took it. Of that I am now certain. Then we must search the other compartments." "With what authority, Hastings? We are private citizens, not police officers. Until we reach Baramulla, I have no power to compel anyone." His expression grew thoughtful. "But perhaps compulsion is unnecessary. Perhaps psychology will serve where authority cannot." We proceeded to the dining car, where the passengers had been instructed to remain. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Lady Ashworth sat apart, staring at nothing. Crewe fidgeted with his spectacles. Miss Sharma read a book with pointed concentration. And Mallory had progressed from whiskey to brandy, his sardonic amusement curdling into something darker. Poirot took his position at the head of the car once more. "Mesdames, Messieurs, I must inform you that a critical piece of evidence has vanished from Sir Dorian's compartment, an accounts ledger, delivered to him last night by Monsieur Crewe." Crewe's head snapped up. "I told you about that." "Indeed you did. You told me Sir Dorian requested it. You told me you delivered it at 11 o'clock. What you did not tell me is that this ledger contained evidence of serious financial irregularities." Poirot let the words settle. Evidence that someone aboard this train would kill to suppress. Mallory laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Finally, the great detective sees clearly. Ashworth was a fraud, a cheat. I told him so to his face, and he had the audacity to act offended. You knew of these irregularities, Monsieur Mallory? I suspected. Why do you think I was blackmailing him?" Mallory drained his glass. 3 years ago. When I handled his accounts, I noticed anomalies. Payments to shell companies, transfers to foreign banks. Nothing I could prove definitively, but enough to make me curious. And when you confronted Sir Dorian, he dismissed me, threatened to ruin me if I spoke. Mallory's jaw tightened. So I waited. I gathered what evidence I could, and when I finally had enough to make him uncomfortable, I made my move. Blackmail. Justice. Mallory's eyes glittered. He destroyed my career, my reputation, my life. I wanted compensation. I wanted him to suffer as I had suffered. And did he agree to your demands? He was negotiating, stalling, more likely, but we were making progress. Mallory leaned forward. Which is precisely why I didn't kill him. We were on the verge of a settlement. Another week, perhaps 2. And I would have had everything I wanted. Poirot stroked his moustache. And yet the ledger has vanished. Someone took it from Sir Dorian's compartment after his death. Someone who knew its contents were dangerous. Then search me. Mallory spread his arms wide. Search my compartment. Search my luggage. You will find nothing, because I have nothing to hide. A generous offer. But I suspect the ledger is no longer in any compartment. I suspect it has been destroyed. Destroyed? I interjected. How? The train's furnace, perhaps. The windows open. It could have been cast into the valley. Poirot shook his head slowly. The physical ledger may be lost, but the information it contained, that, I think, still exists, in the mind of the person who studied it most carefully. His gaze settled on Jonathan Crewe. The secretary went pale. I told you everything I know. You told me there were irregularities, payments to phantom companies, hidden transfers. Poirot's voice hardened. But you did not tell me the nature of these transactions. You did not tell me where the money went or why. You did not tell me, Monsieur Crewe, what crime Sir Dorian was truly concealing. Crewe's hands trembled. He looked around the dining car, at Lady Ashworth, who watched him with sudden intensity, at Miss Sharma, whose book had lowered, at Mallory, whose sardonic expression had sharpened into something predatory. "I can't," Crewe whispered. "If I speak, if you do not speak, a killer goes free." Poirot stepped closer. "You are not a foolish man, Monsieur Crewe. You have worked at Sir Dorian's side for 5 years. You have seen things. You have understood things. And last night, when you delivered that ledger, you understood something more. Something that drove you to arrange a secret meeting with Lady Ashworth. It was not merely about warning her of scandal. It was about protecting her." Poirot's voice softened. "You love her still, do you not? Despite her rejection, despite everything." Crewe's composure shattered. He removed his spectacles and pressed his palms to his eyes. "Yes," he said, his voice cracking. "God help me! Yes! Then tell me what you know. Tell me what crime Sir Dorian committed. Tell me who had reason to silence him forever." The dining car held its breath. Crewe lowered his hands. His eyes were red, but his voice steadied. 5 years ago, before Sir Dorian married Lady Ashworth, there was an incident in Calcutta. A young woman, a clerk's daughter, accused Sir Dorian of assault, criminal assault. Lady Ashworth made a small sound. The case never went to trial. The family was paid off, a substantial sum. The girl was sent away, to England, I believe. The records were destroyed. Sir Dorian's reputation remained untarnished. And the payments in the ledger? Continued settlements. The girl's family kept demanding more. Sir Dorian paid, he had no choice, but the amounts grew larger, the threats more explicit. Crewe swallowed hard. 6 months ago, the father died. The payments stopped. Sir Dorian thought himself free at last. "But someone inherited the father's knowledge," Poirot murmured. "Someone who knew the truth and intended to use it." "Yes." Crewe's voice dropped to a whisper. "The daughter returned to India 3 months ago. She has been watching Sir Dorian, following him. I believe she was aboard this train." Every eye in the dining car turned to Miss Priya Sharma. She had gone very still, her book forgotten in her lap. Her dark eyes met Crewe's accusation with an expression I could not read. Defiance? Anguish? Something deeper? "Mademoiselle Sharma," Poirot said quietly, "is this true?" For a long moment she said nothing. Then she rose, smoothing her skirt with careful precision. "My name is not Sharma," she said. "It is Mehra, Priya Mehra. And yes, Sir Dorian Ashworth destroyed my family." The confession emerged in fragments, each word seeming to cost her. "I was 17 when it happened." A child, really? Sir Dorian was a guest at my father's office. A business meeting, nothing more. He asked me to bring tea. Her voice was flat, emotionless. When I entered, he locked the door. Lady Ashworth covered her mouth with her hand. Afterward, my father tried to seek justice, but Sir Dorian was powerful, connected. The police refused to act. The courts refused to hear the case. We were paid, blood money, and told to be grateful for our silence. And your father spent the next 5 years drinking himself to death. The shame destroyed him. The money Sir Dorian paid barely covered his funeral. Her eyes blazed. I swore on his grave that I would see justice done. I would expose Sir Dorian for what he truly was. "And so you followed him to this train," Poirot said, "under a false name, a fabricated connection to Lady Ashworth. I needed access, close observation. I knew the ledger existed. I knew it contained records of the payments. If I could obtain it, I would have proof. Her hands clenched at her sides. But I did not kill him, Monsieur Poirot. I wanted him destroyed, publicly, utterly, but I wanted him alive for that destruction. Dead, he escapes justice. Dead, the truth dies with him. You were on the vestibule platform last night. For a cigarette, nothing more. And you saw no one, heard nothing? She hesitated, the first crack in her composure. I thought I heard voices. As I approached the platform, 2 people speaking in low tones. I could not make out the words. When I opened the door, the platform was empty. What time was this? 12:30, perhaps later. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The watch on Sir Dorian's wrist stopped at 1:17. You heard voices at 12:30. That leaves nearly an hour unaccounted for. I returned to my compartment. I did not venture out again. Can anyone confirm this? No. Her voice was bitter. I was alone, as I have always been. Poirot paced the length of the dining car, his little grey cells working furiously behind those sharp eyes. We have 4 suspects, he murmured, half to himself. Lady Ashworth, who arranged a midnight meeting and claims her husband was still alive when she returned. Monsieur Crewe, who saw a figure in blue but lacks the physical strength for strangulation. Mademoiselle Mera, who had the deepest grievance but insists the victim was worth more alive. And Monsieur Mallory, who possessed both motive and the physical capacity, yet whose financial interests aligned with keeping Sir Dorian breathing. He stopped abruptly. Hastings, the brandy glass. What about it? In Sir Dorian's compartment, the crystal decanter, 2/3 full, a single glass beside it. His moustache twitched. I assumed Sir Dorian drank alone. But what if he had a visitor? What if someone shared a drink with him before the murder? There was only one glass remaining. What if the second glass was removed, taken by the killer to eliminate evidence? I felt the pieces shifting, rearranging themselves. Then the killer was someone Sir Dorian trusted, someone he would invite into his compartment for a nightcap. Précisément. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Not Mallory. Sir Dorian despised him. Not Mademoiselle Mehera. He did not know her true identity. Not Lady Ashworth. He locked the connecting door against her. That leaves Jonathan Crewe. Poirot turned to face the secretary, who had gone white as chalk. The trusted employee, the indispensable assistant. The man who delivered the ledger at 11 o'clock and claims he retired immediately afterward. No! Crewe stumbled to his feet. I told you, I saw the figure in blue. You told me many things, Monsieur Crewe, but you also confessed to loving Lady Ashworth, to knowing of Sir Dorian's crimes, to possessing access no other passenger enjoyed. Poirot stepped closer. And you wear, if I am not mistaken, a blue silk cravat beneath that immaculate collar. Crewe's hand flew to his throat. The thread, Hastings? Poirot's voice was soft, almost sad. Caught on the door handle, blue silk, not from a dressing gown, from a cravat, pulled loose in a struggle. The struggle that left Sir Dorian Ashworth dead on the vestibule platform. I didn't. Crewe's voice broke. You don't understand. Then help me understand. Poirot took another step forward. Tell me what truly happened at 1:17 this morning. Tell me why a trusted secretary murdered the man he served for 5 years. Crewe's face crumpled. And then, from the far end of the dining car, Charles Mallory began to laugh. Chapter 5. Justice on the Rails. Mallory's laughter rang through the dining car, harsh, mocking, utterly without mirth. He rose from his chair, whiskey sloshing forgotten in his glass, and pointed at Poirot with an unsteady finger. The great detective, he said, his voice dripping contempt. "The famous Hercule Poirot, and you've got it completely catastrophically wrong." Poirot's expression did not change. "You disagree with my conclusion, monsieur." "Disagree?" Mallory laughed again. Crewe couldn't strangle a kitten. "Look at him, pale as milk, trembling like a leaf. You think those soft hands crushed a man's windpipe?" Physical strength can be deceiving, not that deceiving. Mallory set down his glass with a sharp click. "I've watched Crewe for 3 years, back when I still worked for Ashworth. The man faints at the sight of blood. He once had a clerk dismissed because the fellow killed a spider in his presence. Jonathan Crewe is many things, lovesick, foolish, morally flexible, but he is not a killer." I looked at Crewe, who stood frozen, his hand still clutching his throat where the blue cravat nestled. His face was a mask of terror. But was it the terror of exposure, or the terror of false accusation? "Then who, Monsieur Mallory?" Poirot's voice remained calm. "If not Crewe, then who killed Sir Dorian Ashworth?" Mallory's smile turned cruel. "You're the detective. Figure it out." "Perhaps I already have." The words fell like stones into still water. Every eye in the dining car fixed upon Poirot. He moved to the centre of the room, his small figure somehow commanding the space. The morning light had shifted, casting long shadows across the white tablecloths. Beyond the windows, the mountains had given way to gentler hills. We were descending toward Baramulla, toward civilization, toward the authorities who would demand answers. "Let us review the facts," Poirot began, his voice measured and clear. "Sir Dorian Ashworth was strangled on the vestibule platform between midnight and 2 o'clock this morning. His watch, cracked in the struggle, stopped at 1:17, giving us the precise moment of death." He began to pace, hands clasped behind his back. "The killer was someone Sir Dorian trusted. This is proven by the evidence of the brandy, a nightcap shared in the victim's compartment before the murder. The second glass was removed by the killer to conceal their presence." "We've established all this," Mallory interrupted impatiently. "Indeed, but I made an error, monsieur. I assumed the blue silk thread caught on the door handle came from the killer's garment, pulled loose during the struggle on the platform." Poirot stopped pacing. This was incorrect. Crewe's hand fell from his throat. "Then the thread was not from your cravat, Monsieur Crewe. I apologize for the implication." Poirot withdrew the small envelope from his pocket, holding it up to the light. "This thread is not merely blue silk. It is blue silk embroidered with gold, a distinctive pattern. Most distinctive indeed." He turned slowly, his gaze sweeping the assembled passengers. "Lady Ashworth, your dressing gown, the one you wore to your midnight meeting on the vestibule platform, what colour is it?" Lady Ashworth had gone very still. "I told you I wore white." "Your nightdress was white, yes, but your dressing gown, the garment you would naturally don before venturing into the cold mountain air, what colour is that?" Silence stretched like a held breath. "Blue," Lady Ashworth whispered. "Blue silk, with gold embroidery." The confession did not come easily. Lady Ashworth sat rigid in her chair, her face a porcelain mask. The other passengers had drawn back, creating a circle of empty space around her, a quarantine of accusation. "You are mistaken, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice barely steady. "I explained my movements. I went to meet Jonathan. He never came. I returned to my compartment. I saw no one. I did nothing." "You saw no one," Poirot repeated, "and yet someone saw you. Mademoiselle Mera heard voices on the platform at 12:30. 2 people speaking in low tones. When she opened the door, the platform was empty. But the conversation she interrupted, That was between you and Sir Dorian, was it not? No. You claimed the connecting door was locked from your husband's side. This is true, but there is another way to reach the vestibule platform, through the corridor, as any passenger might walk. You needed no connecting door. Lady Ashworth's hands tightened in her lap. Let me tell you what truly happened. Poirot's voice softened, almost gentle. You did go to the platform to meet Jonathan Crewe. But Crewe, as he confessed, lost his nerve. He saw a figure in blue approaching and retreated to his compartment, never realizing the figure was you, not a mysterious stranger. You waited on the platform. Crewe did not come, but someone else did. Lady Ashworth closed her eyes. Sir Dorian, Poirot continued, your husband. He had been watching you for some time, I think. He suspected the affair. The letter you wrote to Crewe spoke of his suspicions. He suspects, you wrote. We must decide. When you did not return to your compartment, Sir Dorian grew concerned, or perhaps merely suspicious. He dressed and went looking for you. He found you on the vestibule platform, waiting for your lover. There was a confrontation, an argument. Mademoiselle Mera heard the voices. She opened the door, and you both fell silent, retreating to opposite ends of the platform until she left. And then... Lady Ashworth opened her eyes. They glistened with unshed tears. Then he told me, she whispered. He told me what he had done, what he truly was. The story emerged in fragments, punctuated by silences that stretched like wounds. I knew Dorian was not a good man, Lady Ashworth said, her voice hollow. I married him for his money. I won't pretend otherwise. But I believed him merely cold, calculating. I did not know he was a monster. He told you about Mademoiselle Mera, Poirot said quietly. He boasted about it. Her voice cracked. Standing there in the freezing wind, he laughed at me. Said I was no better than the others, the secretaries, the clerks' daughters, the women he had used and discarded throughout his life. Said I should be grateful he had chosen to marry me at all. Priya Mera had risen from her seat, her face ashen. He admitted it? She asked, her voice trembling. He admitted what he did to me? Lady Ashworth met her eyes. He was proud of it. He said you were nothing, a momentary amusement. He said your father's death was a blessing, one less parasite demanding payment. The sound that escaped Priya's throat was not quite human. I lost control, Lady Ashworth continued, her gaze dropping to her hands. I don't remember deciding to do it. One moment he was laughing, the next my hands were around his throat, and I was squeezing with all the strength I possessed. He struggled. He clawed at my face, my arms, but I did not let go. I could not let go. Her voice dropped to a whisper. When it was over, he fell against the railing. And I stood there, in the wind and the dark, and realized what I had done. Poirot let the confession settle before speaking again. And afterward, you returned to your compartment as though nothing had happened? I cleaned myself. There was blood under my fingernails, his blood from where he scratched me. I washed it away. I hid the dressing gown at the bottom of my trunk. Lady Ashworth's composure was crumbling, tears streaking her cheeks. I told myself it was justice, that he deserved it, that no one would ever know. But you made one error, Poirot said gently. The thread caught on the door handle, blue silk with gold embroidery, a pattern unique to your garment. When you pulled the door open to return to the corridor, your sleeve caught on the brass. You did not notice. You could not have known. Such a small thing, she whispered, such a small, stupid thing. It is always the small things, madame. The details overlooked, the traces left behind, the little grey cells. They see what the eye does not. Poirot turned to face the assembled passengers. "The case, it is complete. Lady Ashworth killed her husband in a moment of rage. Provoked, yes, by revelations of monstrous cruelty, but murder nonetheless. The law does not recognize provocation as justification. The courts will decide her fate." "And the ledger?" Mallory demanded. "The evidence of Ashworth's financial crimes?" "Destroyed, I suspect. Lady Ashworth took it from her husband's compartment after the murder. Insurance, perhaps, or merely the instinct to eliminate anything that might complicate matters." Poirot's gaze settled on Lady Ashworth. "Am I correct, madame?" She nodded slowly. "I burned it, in the washroom, page by page. I thought, if anyone investigated, they would focus on the money, on the blackmail, not on you," Poirot finished. "The grieving widow, the obvious innocent." "I did not plan any of this," Lady Ashworth said, her voice breaking. "I did not board this train intending to kill my husband. I didn't even know, until last night, what kind of man he truly was. And yet, when you learned the truth, you chose murder over justice. You took the law into your own hands. You denied Mademoiselle Mera the closure she sought, the public exposure of Sir Dorian's crimes." Lady Ashworth looked at Priya Mera, her eyes red and swollen. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know it means nothing, but I am sorry." Priya stared at her for a long moment. Then she turned away, her face unreadable. The train pulled into Baramulla station at precisely 11 o'clock. Inspector Gupta of the Indian Police awaited us on the platform, summoned by telegraph from the previous stop. He was a compact man with shrewd eyes and a brisk manner, and he listened to Poirot's account with the attentiveness of a professional who recognized another professional. Lady Ashworth was taken into custody quietly, without struggle. She walked between two constables with the dignity of a woman who had accepted her fate, or perhaps welcomed it. The weight she had carried, even for those few hours, had aged her immeasurably. Jonathan Crewe watched her go, his face a study in conflicting emotions. Love, I thought, grief. And perhaps beneath it all, relief that his own cowardice had kept him from the platform that night. Charles Mallory collected his luggage with sardonic efficiency. "Well, Monsieur Poirot," he said, pausing beside us, "I suppose I should thank you. Ashworth's death means I'll never see my money, but at least I'm not swinging for a murder I didn't commit." "Your observation about Monsieur Crewe was useful," Poirot admitted. "The physical improbability of his guilt helped clarify my thinking." "Useful?" Mallory laughed bitterly. "The first useful thing I've done in 3 years. Perhaps I'll put it on my calling card." He tipped his hat and disappeared into the crowd. Priya Mera lingered on the platform, watching the mountains she had crossed to find justice. Justice that had been snatched from her grasp by another's rage. Poirot approached her gently. "Mademoiselle, this is not the ending you sought." "No." Her voice was quiet, but steady. "He's dead. Beyond punishment. Beyond shame. Lady Ashworth will hang for killing him, and my father's name will never be cleared. The truth is known now. Those of us who heard Lady Ashworth's confession, we know what Sir Dorian was, what he did to you. Witnesses to a confession made in a dining car." She smiled bitterly. "That is not justice, Monsieur Poirot. That is gossip." Poirot was silent for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded paper. "Before she burned the ledger," he said, "I observed certain entries. I have committed them to memory, dates, amounts, account numbers. With this information, a skilled solicitor might trace the payments Sir Dorian made, trace them back to their source. He pressed the paper into her hand. Your father's name may yet be vindicated, mademoiselle. Not through vengeance, but through evidence. Priya stared at the paper, then at Poirot. Why would you do this for me? Because justice, mademoiselle, is not merely about punishment. It is about truth, and the truth deserves to be told, properly, through the appropriate channels, where it cannot be dismissed as gossip. His moustache twitched. Also, I confess, because Sir Dorian Ashworth was a thoroughly unpleasant man. The little grey cells, they have their preferences. For the first time, Priamera smiled, a genuine smile, small but real. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. She turned and walked away, the paper clutched in her hand like a talisman. The platform emptied. The Kashmir Express sat silent on its tracks, its elegance tarnished by the events of the night. Porters moved through the carriages, cleaning, restoring, preparing for the next journey, as though murder were merely an inconvenience to be swept away. I stood beside Poirot, watching the mountains catch the midday light. A strange case, I said at last. I thought Mallory was the killer, then Crewe. I never suspected Lady Ashworth. That was her greatest protection, Hastings, the grieving widow, the beautiful wife. We expect victims, not villains, in such a guise. Poirot shook his head slowly. But the human heart, it contains multitudes, love and hatred, grief and rage, the capacity for tenderness and the capacity for murder, side by side. Do you pity her? Poirot considered the question. I understand her, Hastings, which is not the same thing. She learned her husband was a monster. She struck out in the heat of that revelation. But she did not strike only for herself. She struck for every woman Sir Dorian had wronged. For Mademoiselle Mera, for the others whose names we will never know. Does that excuse what she did? No, nothing excuses murder, but it explains it. And sometimes, mon ami, understanding is the closest we come to mercy. He turned from the platform, collecting his hat and stick. Come, Hastings, we have missed our holiday in Gulmarg, and I find myself thoroughly exhausted by trains. Let us find a quiet hotel with acceptable coffee and symmetrical furniture. My little grey cells, they demand rest. I followed him into the station, leaving the Kashmir Express behind. But the memory of that night, the cold, the wind, and the shadow of justice, served in the most terrible way, stayed with me long after the mountains had faded from view. And so concludes our journey aboard the Kashmir Express, a tale of colonial secrets, buried crimes, and the terrible price of revelation. Lady Ashworth killed her husband, yes, but was Sir Dorian not the true architect of his own destruction? The monster who escaped justice for so long, only to meet it in the hands of his own wife. Hercule Poirot would say that murder is never justified, that the law must be respected, even when the law fails. But the little grey cells, they remember Priamera's face. They remember the names unspoken, the crimes unpunished, the silence that protected Sir Dorian Ashworth for 30 years. Justice, mes amis, is a complicated thing, and sometimes on the rails through the mountains it takes forms we do not expect. Until next time, this has been Tales of Mystery and Moonlight. Sleep well, if you can. The end.